Hey guys, I just wanted to jump on here and share my story about my health issues. This is something I'm really passionate about and that I struggled with for quite some time. And I just wanted to get on here and share my story to let other people know that, you're not alone. It can be, well, for me personally, it was quite a lonely experience, even though I had so many amazing people around me. It's just they don't really understand what you're going through, and it's not their fault, but it just makes you feel a little alone sometimes. So I just wanted to share my story to hopefully help you guys not feel so lonely in your journey. So this might get a little TMI, so just a heads up. But my story began, I'd say, when I was around 13. So I've always really been in tune with my emotions, I guess you could say, and a bit of an emotional person at the same time. I was that younger girl that always wanted cuddles with mom. I'd get quite upset quite quickly. And I mean, I always thought it was a normal thing because nobody ever said anything different. So just some days I would, be really, really happy, and then some days not so much, and I'd just feel a little down and just want cuddles. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I guess looking back at it now, it's not necessarily completely normal, and I would feel like that's where it really started. But so yes, I was quite an emotional person, and around 13 is when I got my period. For a few days beforehand, I was getting really, really bad period pains. Not that I knew it was period pains, but my stomach was killing me, and all I wanted to do was roll up into a little ball and sit in front of the fire. So my period finally came, and as I said, it was quite painful, and my mum gave me some Panadol and a heat pack, and just that's what you had to do. I just thought that was normal. Every girl gets this. Every girl goes through this pain. There's no big deal about it. And then, time went on, and I continued to get more periods, but they weren't regular. So I didn't get them every month. They were quite irregular to start off with. So we went to the doctors and told them that, it was irregular and that they were quite painful, and they're just like, that's just your period. They get sore. Just have some Panadol, have a heat pack, and relax. So that's what we continued to do. But as the time went on, my mum and I thought that, something wasn't right. They were very, very painful. So we continued to go to doctors. We've seen different doctors at our GP. And they all said the exact same thing, and then some of them started to do little tests just to make sure it wasn't anything else. But all the tests came back clear, and I can't even tell you how many. I have gone through so many tests, from then until now, trying to figure out what was wrong and what I could do to help it. But I kind of just ended up being this is something I'm gonna have to deal with. We still tried to find out what was wrong, but it was just something that I was going to have to deal with for the rest of my life. So they ended up giving me a stronger painkiller that I would have every time, and it did help, which was good considering it was to the point where I basically couldn't go to school. I could barely even stand. They were that painful. All I would do is curl up in the bowl and cry. That's all I wanted to do. So this went on for a few years, and I was that type of kid that could literally eat everything and anything, and nothing would affect me. I could eat whatever I wanted, and I wouldn't gain weight. I was that type of girl that was always skinny, no matter what I ate. And I wasn't massively into working out. I'd do some here and there, but it wasn't frequent. So, you know, I was quite fortunate in that. And trust me, like, I mean, I loved my veggies and I still do, but I didn't eat them all the time. You know, I loved my pizza, I loved my ice cream, my chips, my lollies, my everything. Everything to do with junk food, I loved. And you know, like growing up, I'd get bloating, but again, that's just something normal. Like all girls get that, you know, when you get your period, you go through puberty. It's just a normal thing. Well, you know, so I thought anyways. But then as the years went on and I got a little older, around 18, 19, at this point I was still going to doctors to try and find what was wrong because it was getting worse. My periods were getting 10 times more painful. I was getting more bloated. And at this point, I was actually noticing that I had a slight intolerance to some foods. So it started with dairy. So I started having lactose-free milk, lactose-free cheese. I could still have ice cream at this point. And, you know, just normal milk and stuff in recipes. Like if I were to have, I don't know, say a cake or something, and it has normal milk in there, I could have that. But so I started to change it, and I seen a little bit of difference, you know, in the way I felt. I didn't feel so sick, which is one of the things that I was starting to feel at this point. And so I continued to do that, but, you know, as the months went on, at this point, my symptoms got worse a lot quicker. So a few months went on and it started to be that I couldn't have normal ice cream either. So I had to switch to lactose-free ice cream. And I went to the doctors. I decided to change doctors because I had moved to a different suburb. So I decided to change doctors and see if, you know, they could help me any more than my other ones were. So I went there, and the first lady I seen that was there, as soon as I told her about my symptoms, she said that it sounds like it might be endometriosis. So by this point, my mum and I kind of had a feeling that it would be like that, and I just had a gut feeling that I would have some sort of struggle to have children. I wasn't too sure on what it was, but I don't know. There was just a gut feeling that I would possibly struggle. So, you know, it was kind of like a bit of a relief once she told me that, like, you know, somebody'd actually figured it out. But at the same time, it was kind of a smack in the face, like, to think what is wrong with you is one thing, but to be told by a professional that they think with their professional opinion that this is what's wrong with you, it's a big thing to swallow. So I ended up going into my car and calling my partner on the way home and just bawling my eyes out, because to me, as soon as I heard that, I thought, you know, my life was over. I couldn't have kids. I thought that's what it meant, that I wasn't going to be able to have kids. And sorry, my dog's barking. And, you know, my whole life, all I've wanted is to be a stay-at-home mum. All I wanted to be is a stay-at-home mum. So to find out that I couldn't, and I mean, now I know that that's not what it means when you have endometriosis, but at that point, that's what I thought. So it was quite painful to deal with emotionally. So I went home and I curled back into bed and just cried, and I ended up crying myself to sleep. I couldn't even get up the courage to call my mum and tell her, because she knew that I was going to the doctors that day. And I couldn't do it. Like, it was too painful to say out loud that the doctor thought that I had endometriosis. I mean, it was hard enough to say to my partner because, you know, at this point, I thought that I was going to be the reason why we couldn't have kids, and that just, it killed me. So I ended up going off to sleep and waking up a little later, and I'd calmed down a little bit. I was still very much upset, but I'd calmed down a bit, and I called my mum and told her, and she's like, I thought it was that, but at least now we know what it is, so we can try and fix it. So that kind of gave me a little bit of hope, and I just took the next few days to just regroup a bit. I did end up having to go to work the next day, and I was just in my own little head space, like I was just not present at all, and my boss noticed something was wrong, and he asked what was wrong, and I knew that if I had said it out loud that I was going to cry again, so I just said nothing was wrong, and kind of just kept to myself. And then the next day, he was there again, and I had felt a little bit better and knew that I wouldn't cry as much if I said it to him then. So I told him, and I explained, this is why I'm always having to take days off when it comes to my period. Like for the first few days of my period, I'm either having to take off, or I literally just sit in the corner at work. Like I couldn't do anything because I worked in hospitality at the time, so I was always on my feet. Hang on. Yeah, so I was always on my feet, so I kind of just kept into the corner, or I didn't come to work. So he's like, that it makes sense, like it sucks, I'm sorry to hear that, but he was very supportive, and said that if there's anything he can do, he's there, which was really nice. But yeah, anyways, so I ended up getting a referral from the doctor to go see a gynecologist to confirm that it was endometriosis, because the only way to diagnose endometriosis properly is to have a keyhole surgery, which is basically, as the name suggests, a keyhole surgery. So it's just a small incision in your stomach. They do a few, and they put a camera in there, and they check to see if there's any endometriosis spots. So I went on the waiting list to go see my gynecologist, and I finally got in, spoke to him, and he said that it does sound like I have endometriosis, and that I may also have adhesions. So at this point he said that, to go on the waiting list to have the surgery to confirm that it is endometriosis, I have to do a few tests. So I had to get an ultrasound that does a thorough check, which I'd had multiple ultrasounds already, growing up trying to figure out what was wrong. But this is meant to be one that's specifically looks for endometriosis and polycystic ovaries and all that sort of stuff. So I went and did my ultrasound and waited for my results. And while this was happening, I was also at going to a naturopath, because I like to be a bit more natural. I got to the point growing up that I was having so much Panadol and painkillers that it didn't really affect me much, because my body got so immune to them because of how regular I was having to have them. So I ended up having to stop taking any sort of painkillers for a while, just to let my body reset, so that when I did take them, that it would actually work. And so I got to, wanting to be a bit more natural in the things that I did, and like medication wise and everything like that. And I I just really didn't want to have surgery. That was the last thing I wanted, and I knew that that was the only thing that I could do, to diagnose me and like properly. But he said that if he sees any endometriosis spots in there while he's doing the keyhole surgery, that they will take it out there, so I don't have to go under twice. So that was really freaking me out. So I went to a naturopath to try and heal myself naturally, and she said that from what she understands, that it does sound like endometriosis, but because the only way to properly diagnose it is with the surgery, she couldn't go solely off that. So she just helped me heal my gut and try and balance out my hormones, because we figured out that my hormones were quite imbalanced, and that I ended up having more than one intolerance. So at this point, my intolerance to lactose had gotten quite bad, and it had even gotten to the point where it wasn't just the lactose that I was intolerant to, it was the dairy itself. So I went off dairy completely, and we worked out that I was also had a slight intolerance to eggs. So I could have eggs in a mixture, or if I were to have an omelette that has a lot of veggies or something else in it, then it would go down a bit better. But if I were to just have a plain omelette or scrambled eggs or something like that, it would upset my stomach quite a lot. So I stopped having eggs as well, and for a bit of time she made me do a food diary. So I jotted down everything that I was eating, when I was eating it, and how I felt after each meal, to try and pinpoint what was working and what wasn't working for me. And at the end of the day, I would always have to write how my overall day went, as in pain-wise, so how much pain my stomach was in and how sick I felt. So doing that, it helped quite a lot pinpoint the things that my body was good with and wasn't good with. And we focused on, looking at anti-inflammatory foods to help with the bloating and try and minimize the endometriosis if that is what I had. Because endometriosis feeds off inflammation. So yeah, we worked on that, and she was also giving me herbs. So I had liquid herbs that I would have every day. I'd have to have twice a day, and that helped with my nausea, my stomach pains, and just again to balance out my hormones. So I was having that for quite a while, and I did start to see an improvement. Now, obviously doing things naturally doesn't, fix it straight away. But over a few months I did see some sort of improvement. And, by this point I had gone to see the ultrasound place, and I'd done my ultrasound, and I was waiting for my results and for my gynecologist to call me back to say, that I could go on the waiting list to have this surgery. But he never actually got back to me. So I called him 2 or 3 times, his office, and they had told me that, he was a bit busy and that he would get back to me, and he never did. And I didn't go and keep bugging him because about 2 or 3 weeks after I'd had my ultrasound, I found out that I was pregnant. So obviously, being pregnant, you couldn't have the surgery, so I didn't worry about it. I just focused on the pregnancy, and everything was going all good until I hit 9 weeks, when I had a miscarriage. And that in itself was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to be through, physically and emotionally. So we got screwed around quite a lot with the doctors. One doctor would say that I was having one doctor would say I wasn't, until the next day when I had the ultrasound to confirm that I had miscarried. And I ended up going back a few days, well, maybe like 2 days later to the hospital because I was in excruciating pain. And to be honest, I'm not 100% sure what that was from. I don't know if that was from the miscarriage itself or if it was something that was, had to do with whatever was wrong inside. But anyway, so I ended up getting through that, and that in itself was, as I said, quite hard emotionally, and it did take a toll on my relationship, and it was quite a lonely experience. You feel like nobody understands where you're coming from or what you're going through, and even to talk to my partner about it, it was quite difficult because we dealt with it in two totally different ways, and it did take a long time to get over it, or get through it, I should say. But yeah, so after going through all of that, I decided that I would continue trying to fix my body naturally and try and heal it so that, when we were ready to have a family, that it would be a bit easier. So I did my own research about, endometriosis, because at this point that's the only sort of thing that I had been told that I might have. So I was basing majority of my research on that, and with all the research that I found, there wasn't anything that showed what exactly causes endometriosis or how to get rid of it. So they even said that, having a surgery to remove the spots only lasts so long. So you have to have that same surgery every few years because the endometriosis grows back and it can spread. So if you leave it, it can start on your ovaries or your fallopian tubes or wherever, but it can end up actually going to all different organs in your body. So, finding out that, having a surgery wasn't going to mean that I was cured, gave me even more of a reason to try and fix it naturally. So I looked at, fertility diets and anti-inflammatory diets, what sort of foods are bad for inflammation and what foods help. And some of the foods that can set off your endometriosis. So, right now there might be, different research and evidence and everything, but when I was doing this a few years ago, there wasn't a whole heap there. Not a lot of people actually know or knew about endometriosis, how it works, how it, is cured, how to deal with it, anything like that. So it is something that is quite common to go undetected, and that's another thing that makes it so lonely, and I'll get into that in a minute. But things that I found was, caffeine and red meat and dairy and gluten and, all these other things were bad for it. So I had decided that I was going to slowly cut that stuff out. So I was already off dairy and I didn't have much gluten as it was, and I did notice that I do have a slight intolerance to gluten, so I wasn't having that very often. But I decided at this point that eventually I would want to become vegan, because to me I was already halfway there. So I figured, why not? And if it was going to help, worst thing is I give it a shot and it doesn't work. So that was where my head was at, and that's where I planned to go. But I think because I was so determined to get there, that my body and my mind, I guess, decided to make it that the smell, the taste, and the thought of having meat would make me physically sick, which really sucked considering I worked at a steakhouse. So I ended up going off of it, but because it happened so quickly, I didn't get the chance to do my proper research or slowly, transition into a vegan diet. So I didn't have all of the information on what to have, to keep my nutrients up, and what proteins they were, how to get my iron, how to get my calcium, everything, So I did struggle with that a bit, and that made it a bit hard. So at this point I had gotten pregnant, so it was hard to have a little bit of morning sickness and then not being able to eat a massive amount of food because my body didn't like meat either. So it was a little hard, but I did what I could. I had my smoothies and they really helped because I could get a lot of nutrients in with that. But I was still far from a perfect vegan diet. So yeah, I ended up kind of working on it and building up my knowledge and all that sort of stuff. And I did see a big improvement in my health and the way I felt. I was obviously still getting very, very painful period pains, but my pains when I wasn't getting my period had lowered. They didn't disappear. I still had them, but they had gone down a bit. And my nausea, so every day I would feel sick, and obviously certain things would make it worse, certain things not necessarily would make it better. I just kind of had to deal with it. But eventually that kind of disappeared a little bit, which was great. And then so this is coming up to the start of last year. I had almost perfected, well, not perfected, but gotten really good at knowing what to have in a vegan diet that would be beneficial. So yeah, I was doing pretty good. I was feeling a bit better, and I was feeling better in myself. I was starting to talk about my experience with the whole thing a bit more, because I found that it helped me. Not that I really found anybody else that had gone through it, but in some way just talking about it makes you feel a bit better, because it's quite a lonely experience. All the, for me, every day was a struggle. So I was either in pain or feeling sick, feeling down. Like my moods would go up, down, sideways, every way. And so for me, that was quite hard, because I didn't want to sit there and complain about it, because I didn't want to be one of those people that was just bugging everybody with my issues. But at the same time, because I went so long without knowing what was wrong with me exactly, and finding somebody that, a doctor that did know what was wrong with me, it almost makes you feel like you are making this up in your head, and that you're just being a bit stupid, and that you shouldn't say anything because it's not as bad as you're making it out to be. But I think it is, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to share this story, was because, yes, it is, it's not a physical illness, it's not I guess, yeah, it is, but it's not something you can see, It's not like it's a broken bone where somebody can see that you've broken your bone. It's something that's inside. And I just want you to know that you're not alone. You know, even though I never got properly diagnosed with endometriosis, and for all I know, it could be or it couldn't be. But I understand the struggle of feeling alone and feeling as if, you know, you're making things worse in your head and that you shouldn't, like, you don't have the right to feel this way, because you do. And I'm so passionate about, you know, making sure that you know that it's okay to not feel okay. It really is. Yeah. But coming up to, you know, this last year, at the start of the year, I was almost getting better. You know, I was, I guess, having a normal life. You know, I'd still get painful periods and be a little sick some days, and obviously depending on the food I ate, I would feel better or worse. But I was at the point where I almost knew what foods would offset my stomach and make me feel worse. And then March came around, the end of March, and I ended up falling pregnant again, and my diet completely went out. So I ended up not being able to eat anything. I was basically throwing everything up, and the only thing that would go down was meat. So I had to start eating meat again, which, you know, I mean, I wasn't thrilled about, but I was okay with doing what I had to do to make sure that I was, you know, healthy enough and my baby was healthy enough. So I had to eat meat for about 20 weeks. And then I was slowly getting turned off it again, and I was able to eat more of my fruits and veggies and stuff. But I mean, everything worked out great. I ended up getting a beautiful baby boy out of it. You know, and he's only 7 weeks along, and my body's just getting back to normal now, and I'm sure I will still have a few ups and downs, and it's not something that, you know, disappears. This illness is with you forever. But at the end of the day, I'm not upset or annoyed that I have this issue, because looking back at my life when I was younger and all the crap that I would eat, my body has made me not be able to eat those foods without feeling sick. So I'm putting more nutrients into my body and doing better things for my body. And, you know, even with like the chemicals that I put in, like I make sure they're as natural as they can be, and I try not to have anything that's toxic or anything like that, you know. And so as much as it sucks, I'm actually grateful that I went through what I did, because it's helped me learn a lot more about, you know, different things when it comes to like diets and foods and chemicals and everything like that. But also it's helped me become more in tune with myself and my body, and really start to listen to it, you know, and pick up on when things are a little different, you know. And I'm quite happy about that. I mean, I've become so in tune with my body that I knew the second that I was pregnant with him. Like I knew something was different, something felt different, and I knew. And, you know, like, I don't know, I think it's a blessing. And whether or not you're at that point in your journey now or not, just know that you can get there. And I believe in you, and I'm here for you if you ever need to talk. All right, bye.